Welcome everyone to our second episode of our podcast called Participant Conversation. In this episode, we have as a working language English because of our invited guests. Today's topic will be studying anthropology in the north of Europe and more particularly in Scandinavia. Together with us today, we have Manos and Nikos, as we were last time, and our guests are Elena, Sara, that are in the master at the University of Oslo. I'm very glad that all of you could join us today. Now, first of all, I would like to start with some question, if you don't mind. Would you like to tell us some things about yourselves and where are you from and what is your academic background?
I can start. My name is Elena, and I study my second year of my master at the University of Oslo. And I've been doing both my bachelor and master here in Norway, but done several exchanges in different places. And my fieldwork thesis, it's about Costa Rica and how the lifestyle migration of North Americans are impacting the local autonomy. And I don't know.
And your bachelor studies are in anthropology as well, right?
Yes. I also did my bachelor in anthropology here at the same university.
Sarah?
Yeah, hello, I am Sara. I also did both my bachelor's and my master's here in Oslo, 1 year ahead of you, Helene, but I have been a bit slow because of the pandemic and everything. Also did several exchanges, one in Costa Rica. So I'm also very interested in Latin America, and right now I'm working on my master's thesis, which is about amber artisans in Chiapas in Mexico, and what kind of struggles they're facing today and how they navigate in this violent landscape.
Okay, I was wondering, and we had this discussion earlier, about how did you learn about anthropology? I mean, I know that here in Norway, for example, anthropology is a course in high schools, so even in elementary schools now.
In elementary school, no. I mean, we have social sciences as a general topic, but in high school, it is possible to elect a course called social anthropology and sociology, which I think is really cool because it means that a lot of people from high school level start to learn about the field. I did not take that in high school personally, so it took me a while to discover anthropology. I actually started out doing a semester of development studies in Vietnam, which I thought was cool because you learn about the culture. I was kind of on the track of something at the same time. Development studies has a lot of numbers and statistics and economy, and I was like, no, I don't care about the economy.
You did this course as a bachelor student or as a high school student?
Bachelor. It's kind of, you can in Norway you have something called semester studies, which is you can do 30 credits of something. I could continue to do a bachelor in development studies if I wanted to, but I didn't. So I started with that. And I realized, I was more interested in the cultural part. So then I realized that, anthropology is kind of looking more into the topics that I am interested in. That's why I started on the bachelor afterwards.
And when you applied for the bachelor's, did you apply for any other departments or only anthropology?
I had psychology as a second choice. First, I actually had psychology 1 year, but the year I applied and got in, then I had anthropology on my first. But we were talking about it earlier because that's kind of unusual in Norway. Because a lot of people that start studying anthropology on bachelor level, they actually have sociology or psychology on their first choice. And then they just end up in anthropology because it's easier to get in. And it's very difficult to get into the two others.
What is the difference between the two departments? I mean, first of all, how many choices do you have when you do your applications?
3 or 5.
3 or 5. So 5 is the limit.
Yeah,
let's say.
Let's say it's 5.
So, and what are the criteria to get in those departments?
They only base it on grades.
Based from
high school grades. Yeah. So high school grades is the only thing that matter. And psychology is very popular in Norway. A lot of it's almost like medicine. So the grades are the average you need to get in is super high. Sociology, is also like increasingly getting popular, but anthropology, at least when we started our bachelor, it was quite low, meaning like almost everyone can get in. You don't need to have good grades from high school, which means that you also end up with a kind of mixed lot of people.
Why do you think that anthropology wasn't, at least back then, so unpopular?
Well, I don't think it's very popular still,
Yeah.
honestly. It's a good question, and I don't know what you think about that, Sara, but to me, I do think it's about like not being that known. People don't really understand what it encompasses and what it's about, and not at least like it's quite difficult to imagine what you work with. Like if you study psychology, you realize you're going to be a psychologist, and it's a popular field. Everyone knows about it. Anthropology, people don't really understand what you become of it, what you can work with, and maybe, I mean, I remember in the beginning of our program, and they asked like, what do you think this program is about? And everyone was saying, we don't really know. We don't really understand what it is.
Okay, I have another question before moving to Sara and her experience from Denmark. I'm wondering, do you have any, how should I put that? Any problems, let's say, with your family when you decided to study anthropology? Do they criticize you? Do they say, you know what? What is that? Why anthropology? What are you gonna do after your studies?
It's an interesting question. I don't think I faced that much like pressure from my parents on that side. They knew I had looked at psychology before, so they were a bit like, well, maybe it's smarter to do that. You'll get a good degree, you'll get a good career. So maybe it would be wiser to do something like that. At the same time, I already had a sister studying sociology. So they were kind of used to like us going in a social scientist direction.
It's so funny. My sister also studied sociology.
So yeah, I didn't face too much, but they did have like the same practical mindset of psychology being a better choice. Since in my case I did have the grades to get into it, it was like, well, when you have the option.
Okay. So Sara, would you like to share your experience with anthropology coming from Denmark?
Because in Denmark it's quite different from here. It's a really popular study, and it's almost impossible to get in. You need to have like A in what is it called, like on average. So it's close to impossible, and you can apply in two ways, either by grades or you have to like send a motivation letter. But then you need to have many years of experience, and you also need to have kind of good grades. And in high school, I did not have very good grades. I was more interested in the social life. So I already lived in Norway when I found out that I could study anthropology. And when I found out that I could get into the school here, because I met some other Danish people that I was working with who studied anthropology. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. But it was a really big surprise to me as well that people didn't really want to be here when we started, because for me it was the only thing I applied for. And I really wanted to study anthropology. So I was super disappointed during the bachelor's, at least, that people were so little motivated and always talk about dropping out and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's not a high school subject in Denmark.
Okay. So you had no idea about anthropology in your high school years? Not
necessarily. Yeah. Or I don't think it's so common, but still it's such a popular study. So it's kind of interesting that it's the opposite.
Yeah, you don't know why everyone knows about it, kind of.
I think that anthropologists are becoming more popular to use in different businesses and so on. So you hear more from anthropologists in newspapers and in the media in general. So I think that's probably one of the reasons. And then I think many people, at least in my circles, they really want to work with development and different kinds of social entrepreneurships kind of things.
Probably this has to do with the orientation that the University of Copenhagen at least has, which is towards business anthropology. I don't know if you know that. I mean, they have a master's which is quite popular in business anthropology.
Business and health, I think, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two branches of anthropology.
which is quite peculiar to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the most obvious direction.
Well, health, it is in a way. I mean, anthropology of health is a prominent field, but business anthropology is a little bit contradictory in a way.
Yeah.
How business and anthropology could be combined. You were here in Norway before your bachelor studies, as you said, but I'm wondering, as a foreigner student, perhaps the foreign relations between Denmark and Norway are quite, smooth and easy. But I'm wondering what were the criteria to enter the department here
Oof.
as a foreigner student?
It's a good question because it's such a long time ago now that I applied. But I do remember that there was, because we have different grading systems. I remember I spent a lot of time trying to convert my grades from Danish to Norwegian, and also trying to explain why I was qualified to enter school here, because we have different levels of different subjects, and are they equal to each other and things like that. And I think luckily, because Denmark and Norway are so similar, it's kind of easy to convert it. But I think if you came from further away, it could be kind of difficult to convert and say, yes, my English level is the same as yours, or you would have to prove it somehow.
With certificates, you mean?
Yeah, or take a test, like this different test or something like this. But for me, it wasn't so complicated.
Okay.
And you could also, I just thought it would be interesting to mention that at universities, you can also write your exams in Danish.
Yeah.
If you want, you could choose between the Scandinavian languages, Swedish or Danish or English.
Yeah.
So for all your exams, you could actually pick. So you didn't have to write
No,
Norwegian
exactly.
at any point, I think.
No,
Right?
and that just goes to show how much communication and collaboration there is, I think, between the Scandinavian countries, that it allows you to do that.
You mentioned something about Denmark. You have two ways to enter the university, either by your grades, either by a motivation letter and your experience. And this is not quite clear to me. I mean, what experience
So,
can you have as a
like
16, 17 years old?
Yeah, but you can't. But that's why you would have to wait maybe a couple of years, and maybe you work with NGOs or something like
Okay.
this that would qualify you to
Even
apply.
on a volunteering level.
But I was, for example, working in Kenya for, but it wasn't even enough. It wouldn't have been enough to
Okay.
get in. But because my grades were so bad.
Okay.
Can I ask, did you apply in Denmark first?
No,
No, you didn't, right?
no, I knew it
No.
was a dead end. No. And it is a common thing. That's why there have been quite a lot of Danish people studying here. That you have 1 year of anthropology here, and then you ask to be transferred. Or you do your bachelor's, and then you try to apply for the master's.
In Denmark.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I think that's why historically there's been quite a lot of Danish people studying here.
in Norway.
We have also had a few Swedish students in the bachelor's. I think it's kind of the same. It's
So
very similar.
Norway can act as a safe haven for bad students in the rest of Scandinavia.
No, but I don't know, the departments in Sweden, I don't know if they're so difficult to get into as it is in Copenhagen.
No, I would guess it's more similar to Norway.
Yeah.
But it is just a guess, to be fair. Yeah.
And it is also, I mean, if you study elsewhere in Denmark, like in Aarhus or at some of the other universities, it would also be easier to get in.
In the master's level, you mean?
No, in the bachelor's level.
In the bachelor's. Okay.
Then the grades are a little bit, the average is a bit lower.
Okay.
Which is common most places. So the capital is the most difficult to get into. And
Okay.
same in Norway, right? Same in Greece,
prestigious or
probably,
something.
I would assume.
I would like to ask something very practical. What is exactly the structure and the curriculum in the bachelor's? What are the main orientations? In Greece, for example, We learned so much about the founders of anthropology, you know, the founding fathers, and about structuralism, functionalism, and the development of anthropology. And then we have many different elective courses that you really can pick your own way through the degree, but still in each course, the emphasis is put so much into the history of its subdiscipline. What is the case in Norway? I think it would be very interesting to know.
I would say it actually sounds really similar. I don't know what you think, but like we had a lot about the development of the of the discipline and the different founding fathers throughout. And then we had the elective courses, which were like also development anthropology and regional anthropology of like Latin America, Africa, and different areas.
A small clarification, we have to say that here in Norway, the bachelor studies are 3 years, while in Greece, for example, the bachelor studies are for 4 years.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well, depending on how much you focus on history in Greece, of course, we had one course that was technically called the History of Anthropology, and an introductory course, which I guess also kind of focused on the history. But apart from that, I actually think that you have a lot of options to choose your path of interests within the topic. Because like you said, well, we had the political anthropology, economical anthropology, that was mandatory. But then you had electives, which you say you can kind of pick your region. You can pick your topic. If I think Norway is pretty good at focusing, like we have a focus on environmental topics a lot.
Yeah.
So you have several electives within that, or development, or gender. So I feel like, well, personally, I felt that I could design my program to be quite much within my interests.
Yeah. I think maybe for me it was more that I didn't really like many of the courses that were offered in my year. So it became maybe more historical. But I also had, we also have this other thing in Norway where you take 40 student points within another discipline.
Yeah.
And we both did psychology.
It's like a minor, kind of, if to convert it to like American or something that people know, you can say we have a minor in psychology.
Yeah.
More or less.
A question, in the bachelor level, are there any different tracks? For example, in these masters, we have 2 tracks. The one that is called contemporary ethnography, and the other one which is called global political economy, or something like that. So I'm wondering, is that the case also in the bachelor level?
No, not the same way.
So it's a solid, let's say, degree with one track.
Yeah.
And your minor, which is based on your preferences.
Yeah, because I think we got quite a lot of options of electives, which I appreciated. So like I said, you can kind of design it. I also think it's interesting to mention that most of the courses were in Norwegian. So you wouldn't have been able to come here as an international student studying it in English. They're discussing turning it into an English degree as well, like an international degree.
Wow.
It's a discussion, but so far it's still in Norwegian. So yeah, it would only be for people speaking Scandinavian or Norwegian.
Yeah.
We did some of our courses for sure were in English, but some of the beginning courses, the mentoring ones, were in Norwegian.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it like in Greece? All of the courses in Greek or
are taught in Greek, but there's at least in Pantheon University where I obtained my bachelor degree, there are some courses taught in English, but we are specifically about Erasmus students, although Greek students are allowed to attend those courses. It's it's a little bit difficult.
Right. But can I ask you something that I actually wonder about in many countries where most of the courses are taught in the native language? Because we had a lot of, even if the course was taught in Norwegian, we would have a lot of syllabus in English because it's only accessible in English. And obviously Greek is a lot like more popular language than Norwegian. But like, how would you read the big classics? Would it be all translated to
Yes.
Greek, or would you actually? Yeah, so you wouldn't miss out on any.
No, for example,
the-
Thomas Hill and Erickson's book, Small Issues,
Small places,
small
big
places,
issues.
large
Yeah.
issues. I don't know what is the English title. It is translated in Greek, and I think the most important anthropological literature is translated in Greek.
Right.
And I have to say that most of the bachelor students are not quite fluent speaking in English. Again, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're totally right. But the thing is that there were many courses that textbooks, articles, and all the material were provided in English just because it was impossible to be translated. And
Yes, but sorry for interrupting you, but at least in my from my experience, most of these articles somehow they were translated in Greek, either by the professor or by the students. So again, at least when I was in my bachelor years, I had no literature in English. What I have read in English was, my initiative. I wasn't forced by someone to read English literature.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have a different experience.
I mean, because of the selection of courses I had different experience, especially in anthropology of art, anthropology of material culture. Most of the literature were in English. But I remember one professor specifically told me that if you want to study anthropology and you want to have any kind of network, you should be able to do it in English. Because if you rely, which of course it wasn't mandatory, to have courses or material in English. But if you rely just in Greek, you won't be able to go after your bachelor's degree.
You are isolated, if you
Yes,
will.
you're totally secluded from academia. But what about Norway? Are there Norwegian translations, or do you rely on the original material?
It exists a couple of translations, but that would be like the biggest text. I think, the introductory chapter of Malinowski, Argonauts of the Western Pacific. I think maybe that was translated, but in general, they wouldn't do that because I would say in general, when you go to higher education in Norway, so bachelor level, they expect you to know English. Yeah. As it is that they expect you to know English, so they would provide syllabus in English and assume that you are capable of reading it. I remember people struggling with it.
Yeah.
Not everyone is as comfortable reading English, and it's not always the easiest.
The exams, at least in the bachelor level, as you said, you can write your exams either in Danish, Norwegian, or Swedish, but also in English.
Yeah, and I found myself, maybe the first ones I wrote in Norwegian, but I found myself switching to English quite fast, just because when you read all your syllabus in English, I think we all experience this, it's just easier. And some normal terms like commodity, it's like we don't really know a good translation to Norwegian. We would always struggle with that, speaking about it in Norwegian, so it's just easier to just...
But we say that in the bachelor's level it's mostly Norwegian, but some English literature. What about the master's level? Because from my understanding, it's much more of an international level of integration, and it's a public call for everyone abroad that wants to join, especially in the master's you're doing. So then in my head the scenery changes completely. And would you like to talk about how is it, for example, to be students with Nikos, with other people from abroad, that everything, let's say, more or less is expected to be taught and understood in English? Because in Greece, for example, it's next to impossible to have a master's primarily in English or exclusively.
I think it's also a little bit unusual that everything is in English, or at least from my understanding, my other friends here in Norway, their master's degrees were not in English. But I mean, of course, you're still used to reading in English and everything. But I think, it is a bit unusual that everything is in English here and everything is taught in English. We are always talking in English with our peers, which is completely fine. But And so my supervisor is also from Ecuador. So even if I wanted to write my thesis in Danish, if I didn't feel comfortable enough writing in English, for example,
She's not able.
no, what would be the point in doing that? Then I would have to translate it all anyway. But for me, it's fine, I think.
Foreigner professors that are
Yeah.
working in this department.
That's also a lot.
There are a lot, yes, but I think now it's a requirement for these professors to learn Norwegian within 2 years, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a requirement.
Yeah.
So because I don't know why exactly they have this requirement. Probably because they are forced to teach also in the bachelor's level.
Yes, but I think also maybe in order to integrate a little bit more into the Norwegian society, being able to respond to emails in Norwegian and things like that. I don't know if it's expected that you can teach a course in Norwegian after 2 years. I don't know. That would be really impressive.
Indeed.
Probably no, but I was just thinking this, like, to bring in some politics into this. Well, it's just one thing that is very interesting within like the anthropology in Norway, because I work in a Norwegian Anthropology Association, like you guys know, and one debate that is always up for question is that the anthropology in Norway tends to lean more and more towards English. People want to publish in English because most of us know how to write in English, and you get more popularity, it gets written, it gets read more if you do. So they're actually kind of struggling to Norwegianify the anthropology again and make people continue to use our language. I'm not saying that's the reason why the teacher has to do that, but it is a debate that they're actually struggling with. We have the Norwegian Anthropology, not magazine, journal. And they actually have like requirements that 80% needs to be published in Norwegian in order to reflecting and stuff. And it's like they're struggling to have people
the rest
do that.
20% is published in English, I assume. Or in another European language.
It can be, it can be. So they do publish some international, but they're actually struggling to have enough people write in Norwegian because people tend to turn towards English when they can.
I assume there's also, I don't know if it's true, becoming more well known. So maybe that, I mean, if you publish in English, there's a bigger chance that you will be cited by someone else than if you publish something in Norwegian. It's really limited.
Yes.
That's also a very good point.
Yeah. What do you think? What is it like in Greece? Do you publish mostly in Greek or?
I think this is an international, let's say, problem. Or I don't know if it's a problem or not. But I think well-established scholars or precarious scholars, I think at least that they are trying to publish in English just for the reasons that you mentioned, because they gain popularity through this international, let's say, language. But again, I think the situation in Greece is a little bit, of course, quite different than Norway, because, for example, professors, they need to publish also in Greek in order to have teaching material in the bachelor level. Because it's not quite, popular at least to give material in English. So there is this, balance between I would like to be an international subject and communicate my work in broader circles. And on the other hand, I need to be a professor in a Greek university, so I need to publish in Greek in order to teach.
And that's interesting, thinking of it the other way around. If Norwegian professors were to publish in Norwegian here, no one in the master program would be able to use it. Like, they wouldn't be able to put it on the syllabus here because it needs to be in English. So
yeah, that's true.
That's another take on it.
Yeah.
Elena, you said that the master's level is it creates a more international and inclusive space, in a sense. Do you think there are some benefits and for this, and what are maybe some drawbacks, some hindrances of making a national scholarship, I mean, in a national university, so international in its teaching and environment?
Ooh. Well, I definitely think it's a lot of benefits. To me, it makes a lot of sense that anthropology is, well, not taught in English, but that it is international, that you study with people from other countries than yourself, because it also makes the discussions we have in the classrooms way more interesting when you have one person from Bangladesh, one from America, one from Greece, and we're all like comparing how we were taught anthropology, but also, of course, coming with different perspective from our own countries. So that, to me, has been a very valuable like benefit of being in this international program. And well, personally, I don't mind it being in English either at all. It's just a benefit again for me to become better in the language myself, to maybe use later in the career. One thing that is really unfortunate is that last year, I guess, they changed the rules.
The internationals, we have to clarify,
Yeah, please
but
help
are
me
the
with this.
international students, the students that are coming outside of the European Economic Area or the European Union. Now they are obliged to pay quite high tuition fees in the University of Oslo. I mean, it's insanely expensive. I checked the other day the price list in a way, and you have to pay 18,000 euros per year.
Wow.
I mean, it's like the British academia situation.
But I think
Yeah.
Norway was the last country in Scandinavia to do this.
That's a shame because they're seeing it in the master program. It's a smaller diversity because you don't have people coming from all over the world anymore. It's more within Europe and Norway.
So in Scandinavia, you get money from the government to study, right? And in Denmark,
As a student loan.
in Denmark, it's not a loan.
It's a funding, let's say. Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Denmark has a nicer deal.
Okay.
But every year they're trying to like cut it down, or like, because now we get 6 years of money from the government, and now they're talking about only limiting it to like 5 years. And a few years ago, they said that you cannot do 2 bachelor's degrees, and so there's all the time they're trying to cut down on the welfare.
So, as a Danish student here in Norway, are you receiving this money from the Danish government?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
You can also choose the Norwegian.
Landkansen.
Yeah, but it's better the Danish option, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. In Denmark, it's not a loan.
It's
But
like
you
a
can-
scholarship, but here in Norway, it's the student loan, but with quite low rates, I think.
So yeah, so to clarify, we get a combination of a loan and a grant. So it's 60% loan, 40% grant, I think. And but it only becomes like those 40% grant only becomes a grant if you finish your degree. If you decide to study something else and you change the degree, then it's 100% loan. So that puts a bit of pressure on the students as well to pick the right degree right away,
Yeah.
which is an interesting element to it. But yeah, so it's not as good as the Danish system, but for sure, I mean, we're all very grateful for having that system because it, like I said, there's no tuition fee, so it's not to pay tuition, but it allows us to cover the living costs of living like on our own, which is very common in Norway. But in theory, you can, if you live at your parents' place and you study, then you can do it all for free, which is a really nice option. But most of us tend to live alone.
Hello, which is amazing. I mean, this is something completely different in Greece,
But
especially after the
definitely-
financial crisis.
Yeah.
I think most of the students are somehow forced to live with their parents.
I think here our parents don't have so much of a say in what we study because we fund it ourselves, we live by ourselves, we're quite independent from our parents usually. But I imagine that in Greece, if your parents are paying for you, then perhaps they feel more of a right.
Even, in this situation, the Greek family has a completely different structure, a completely different mentality. So even though you are, independent, living by yourself, then perhaps they can express their opinion in a quite harsh way, especially if you study something like anthropology, which is not that, well known in Greek public sphere.
Because I think also one reason why my parents didn't mind me studying anthropology was because we have a really famous anthropologist here. You spoke about his book, Thomas Hylland Eriksen. And the reason is that he is quite outspoken in media about different topics. He's written a lot of popular science books, which is read by people outside of anthropology. So my mother has read his books, for example. So when I said that I wanted to study anthropology, she was like, yeah, like Thomas Hylland Eriksen. And she likes that person, right? So a lot of people know about him. And therefore it was also, well, that's a really cool career.
But probably Thomas Hylland Eriksen is an exception. I mean, he's well known, I mean, in a broader audience. So that's why perhaps anthropology has a popularity here in Norway, just because of him, which is something amazing. But on the other hand, I'm wondering if Thomas Hylland Eriksen at some point, becomes an emeritus professor. That will be the case.
It's an interesting question, because I guess the reason why he's so popular now is because he keeps writing, in a big newspapers, always commenting on the
Social matters.
Yeah, the social matters going on. When a newspaper calls him, he'd always come up with the comments. So I think definitely it will be different when he retires.
I would like to ask, among the students in Greece of anthropology, they are saying that only middle class or rich people could become anthropologists. I mean, it's a common sense among the students, mainly because I think there is it's not easy in Greece to work as an anthropologist, even in NGOs or anything like this. So I would like to know, do you know what percentage of people who get a bachelor degree in anthropology in Norway or in Denmark can work in the field?
I think with just a bachelor's degree, it is difficult to find a job in anthropology. I would say here in Scandinavia, but with a master's degree, I don't know the percentage at all. Do you?
I don't know the percentage. I was thinking though, because there's many jobs that doesn't require anything more than a bachelor degree. But since education is free in Scandinavia, we have the thing called master fever, which means too many people actually take a master degree, like more than is needed for the society. And then since everyone has a master degree and they apply for jobs, then, the bachelor is not worth anything anymore, because it's not really that a lot of jobs require it. So
a master's degree?
Yeah, not necessarily. There's many jobs where they actually just ask for a bachelor degree, but then you don't get a job because someone comes along with a master degree.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
Kind of
you're competing
spoiled problem. It's definitely like a first world problem that is going on in this side of the world.
Yeah,
but it is really something happening and then also with anthropology. So I don't know exactly the percentage either, unfortunately.
But do you know people that they have finished this masters here in the University of Oslo and work in the field? I mean, beyond academia, as anthropologists in the private or the public sector, perhaps.
Yeah, I know quite a few people that work with urban planning and the government and for NGOs. I would say. I think that's pretty common. Yeah,
and also the different sides of public sector. It's quite common when in a job advertisement that they just ask for social scientists, which allows anthropologists to apply, at least, and get a job in many different departments, and
But I think it is a bit of a well-known fact that it can be quite difficult for anthropologists to get jobs. It's not like they're hanging on trees. It is difficult to find a job. You have to sell yourself a little bit, I think. Is it the same in Greece or?
I mean, it's next to impossible to find a job as an anthropologist in Greece, doing especially what you want to do. But I would like to ask something similar. Something related to our discussion. We all know that Norway is a welfare state, right? And its social structure is assisting in many ways. My first question is: are there many fundings for independent research opportunities, or is all of the research done through universities? And the second thing related to what we talked about Thomas Hylland Eriksen, What is the presence of anthropology in the public? Is it just it sounds cool? Is it just we know who this person is, or in a sense is anthropology actually involved in the society, in social policies, in advisory boards, or any kind of assistance apart from academia and theoretical scholarship?
Can you remind me of the first one again?
The first question is, are there funding opportunities for research, for independent researchers, or is it mediated only through universities?
I would say mostly through, well, universities or research institutes. We have quite a lot of research institutes outside of the universities as well. But I haven't heard about too many independent researchers.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm applying for right now. For it, I have only been able to find different grants through the university.
Well, I don't know if it's exactly what you're thinking of, but I feel like anthropologists are more and more recognized within Norway. Like they start actually getting headhunted way more.
That's
I've
cool.
heard about like cases like there was a Norwegian anthropologist getting headhunted for Windows and like in the US. And we just had an anthropologist getting headhunted by the leader of the Norwegian oil fund, which is one of the top businesses you have here in Norway. It kind of controls our whole economy. And he headhunted an anthropologist asking for help to analyze the organization structure, I think.
Yeah.
And actually wanting like a critical analysis of it. And they just published a report from that. So that's quite big in terms of like the importance of anthropologists in Norway.
Yeah.
So
more recognized.
yeah, so that's, I mean, I'm not saying that we are like getting headhunted after we deliver our master thesis. We're quite far from that, but at least you see it becoming more and more recognized. I mean, the leader of the oil fund, he's an economist.
Yeah.
And suddenly he knows about anthropologists. So it's becoming more and more popular within like these other fields.
Another question. Do you think that the foreigner anthropologist here in Norway has any chance to find a job without speaking Norwegian?
Well, it was interesting because I was thinking about when you asked your question, George, or you mentioned Norway being a welfare state. And I realized that I think quite many of the jobs for anthropologists are actually within the system of the welfare state in integration of immigrants that come here, finding jobs for people that don't have a job, that are unemployed, like all these different sectors within the welfare state. I think it's quite a lot of jobs for anthropologists within that. And in those jobs, you would need Norwegian, for sure. I don't know what you think about it, Sara. What's your impression on this?
No, I think unfortunately I agree.
I mean, it would be within research that you can probably like within English, with English, but
it's the only place I could imagine as well.
I mean, it depends on what area you end up with, though, because you definitely have workplaces that you can speak like in English, where the work language is English.
What do you think of Norway as an area for fieldwork for foreigners? Because in our studies in the bachelor's, we dealt with Greek ethnography and ethnography in Greece, which they are not exactly the same thing. And what is the perception of some foreigner? How do you find these from your own perspective? Somebody coming and trying to analyze a particular element of the society or an event?
I feel like within anthropology in Norway, it is becoming more trendy to do fieldwork in Norway as well. There's more
by Norwegians.
Yeah. So there's a lot of projects happening right now in Norway, and I think before anthropologists always used to go to these exotic places, right, and go as far away as possible. But it seems like there's more and more studying in Norway, I think.
But we are also exotic to other people. So.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I always think it's interesting to have the outsider perspective on your own culture, like not just having Norwegians studying Norwegian culture as well, but actually having an outsider perspective on it. And it's interesting that you mentioned it because that's also we have quite a lot of examples of the international people coming to the master in Norway that came to Norway because they wanted to do fieldwork in Norway.
Yeah.
So then they first spent 1 year here, they learned about the culture, they learned about the language, and then they actually spent the fieldwork here as well. So
I think that's completely acceptable.
no, yeah, I'm just thinking
Yeah.
that's an interesting element of it being an international master.
We talked a lot about Norway, a lot about Norwegian anthropologies, a lot about the courses, the curriculum, etc. But what about the area of studies? Because I heard that you could do fieldwork all over the world, but what about Norway? Are there particular places or parts of society or events that you're focusing more as academia there? And what about the Sami population? Because I would feel very bad if we have a podcast about anthropology in the north and don't mention the Sami population.
Well, I mean, there was quite a hot topic about the Sami people and environmental protests. I think you can explain that better than me, to be honest.
There is a lot of interest, I think, in Sami people from anthropology naturally because we study other populations and try to be inclusive and everything. I think it makes sense. And so in the last couple of years, there's also been a lot of talk about the Sami people and land rights and environment. So I think this intersection between environment and land rights and indigenous people has been really prominent lately. But I think also there has also been some other topics like, so in Norway it's kind of funny, but everyone has a cabin here. And for example, during COVID, people were not allowed to go to their cabins for a little while, and it was such a mess. People were
Hysteria.
super angry.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show how important the cabins are for people, even though they have a home. Being able to go to the cabin is just so important.
So this has to do perhaps with the relations between urban population and the nature, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot about the Norwegian national identity bases on nature, hiking, skiing, cabins, things like that.
I can confirm.
Yeah.
As Norwegian, I can definitely confirm. And it's true, like you're saying, it has been a lot of research on that.
I would like to ask something. Okay, we were talking before about how a person in Greece can work to anthropology field as a normal job, which is really rare. But also, I would like to say that for the last month, the Pandia University is occupied because the students are struggling against a new law that the governments would like to pass. It's a law about legalizing the private universities in Greece, and there would be also many restructuring in the state university also. So while there was the university occupied, there was a collective bar by the assembly there, and there was a really conservative politician that posted online that the children they know if they have a degree in social anthropology or a master's in gender studies, they know that they can only find a job as a waiter or as a waitress. So that's why they are doing this collective bar, because they want to connect the university to the labor market. But what I would like to ask is something different. Do you have any experiences of social struggles of any kind in schools, in university, because of some problem of anything, or is something really strange to you?
For example, occupying the university campus.
Quite a lot happening because of neoliberal changes these days of tightening the student or the money from the government. So people are quite angry about that because it really affects your ability to finish your studies and everything. So I think that might be the biggest challenge in Denmark these days in terms of university and everything like that.
And what is the answer of the students regarding this matter? I mean, how do they react?
Well, of course, I think it's because the money from the government, the amount hasn't changed in so many years, and what is it called? The rent has only gone higher. Food is more expensive. Everything is more expensive. So it's almost impossible to do your studies just with the money from the government. So everyone has to work part-time as well. And now they're trying to tighten it even more by saying you can only study so and so many years, and you can, like in many different ways, it gets less of a welfare state for every year. So I think people are just really angry about it because it's not the welfare system that we want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But again, is there any reaction towards these new policies? For example, protests, demonstrations?
Yeah,
I don't know.
everything. Yeah, I don't live in Denmark, so I don't really know if they're occupying the department.
Okay, this is perhaps
Things like this,
a
but-
harsh way to express your reactions towards policy, but I'm wondering in general.
Yeah,
what,
definitely.
how?
Demonstrations and different articles in the news, things like that. It's
On a national level, I definitely think that anthropology are probably receiving less money like to the universities and stuff. So I think the departments are struggling more and more to hire people long term and stuff like that we talked about. On a student level, I mean, you see the same thing, like we receive the same amount of support and then the living cost rise. Although they're not, last time they changed, they actually expanded the amount of months that we receive funding. So it actually is going in the right direction.
that's
Mhm.
good.
Because they changed, we used to receive for 10 months and now we receive for 11. So you only go without the grant or loan for 1 month during summer, which is making it easier to survive as a student. So at least the last time they changed, it was going in the right direction. But yeah, like I said, on the national level, I would assume that the departments and stuff are receiving. I know up in Tromsø now they're combining the anthropology department and the human geography department, and it is because of money. You know, it's an economical decision because the anthropology department don't manage to be independent anymore. So you see all of these different changes going on within the field.
I have a last question because now it's a quite, popular topic in Greece, and perhaps the people who are going to listen to this podcast will be from Greece. I'm wondering what is the situation of the private universities here in Norway or in Denmark? What is the legal status of these institutions? What is the quality of the studies that they can provide? So if you'd like to share some thoughts about this topic, it would be amazing.
It's very interesting because I'm not sure if it's the same in Greece. First of all, technically, we don't have any private universities, but private colleges.
Okay.
Is a definition difference, but
The same here.
yeah, right. They're actually trying to turn to make one university into the first private university as well, which is an interesting topic. But when it comes to private colleges, I'm not sure if they teach anthropology at any of the private
Tell me
colleges.
about, anthropology. I'm wondering in
Yeah.
general about the quality of the study.
Yeah, because the interesting is that it's the opposite of US, for example, and UK. So the public universities are the best ones in terms of academical level. And then, well, this is a bit harsh to say, but you tend to apply to the private ones if you don't manage to get into the public ones. At least say with psychology, you would want to study at the University of Oslo or one of the big universities. If you don't get into that one because you don't have the grades, then you tend to pay for the private college. So it doesn't have a higher status. It depends on the profession. But in terms of psychology, for example, that's the case. So it doesn't really have a high status.
But then there's also the schools for like film and art and so on, and that's usually within the private
And that's the exceptions because University of Oslo don't have film.
And what about Denmark? What is the situation of the private universities or colleges? I don't know what is.
I think it's the same as here in Norway. They also exist, but they're not necessarily known for being any better. But maybe they have another selection of courses that are not offered in the public universities. So there's a really big school, a business school, that's kind of famous in Denmark, and more specialized courses within business and economics and so on.
Same here.
Well, it was the same in Greece because there are no private universities. There are only private. But right now, the government is determined to open up space for private universities. And, that's why students in Greece right now are occupying their schools, are going on protests and demonstrations. Actually, the political environment right now in Greece is quite toxic because not only, but also because of this matter. So, I don't know, future is so unpredictable, but on the other hand, I think that here lies a quite big challenge for academia and for public universities, especially when we are talking about social sciences, how everything is collapsing right now because of this neoliberal approach of what is science and how science should have also economic benefits or economic connotations in a way, what is more profitable.
Yeah, I think that's a common
pattern.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And anthropology isn't quite,
Also, would like to add something small that also now the government in Greece, because of the occupation, has ordered to have online exams. So there are many different. There are some universities where the collective of teachers decided that they will not take part in this, so they have a legal order now from the government. I don't know how it will be used, but it also will be against the teachers in Pandio University. I think so.
Okay, this is a little bit strange because here online exams, or at least how they call it here, is exams at home
home exam.
Home exam.
Yeah,
is a quite popular way of examination. Although I think that the university here is quite concerned about the use of ChatGPT. That was the excuse from the universities against the digital exams, that ChatGPT, is a huge problem, and digital exams are a little bit, weird.
Well, before AI came out or ChatGPT became popular, I think it was a really nice way of having an exam because you get to show your competence and knowledge without the pressure of like showing up for a 5-hour school exam. School exams, like we called it was 5 or 6 hours. You answer a topic, you have to remember all of the anthropology in your head.
And the thing is that you cannot bring any notes at all. So I think this way, is it the same in Greece?
In Greece, you have a 3 hours exams. In some cases, you're not allowed to use your notes. In other cases, you are allowed to use your notes. It's about, the nature of the patient. Some questions are quite open, so it's not that a big deal to use your notes or use your books. But in other cases, you have to remember things by heart, which is not quite pleasant.
No, that's exactly. I don't know. I've never had a school exam where we could bring notes.
No.
So it was always having to remember all the authors, all the key points, all the dates, everything.
And in terms of anthropology, it makes sense. Like you're supposed to understand, the red thread, like the big lines, big connections between things. Not necessarily where Evans Pritchett did his fieldwork back in what year. Like that's not really what you need to show that you understand in anthropology.
I think this method here, exams at home or home exams, is an interesting way, although sometimes quite stressful. Actually, in my experience, because you have 3 or 4 days to write an essay which is about 2,600 words, using 8 references from the syllabus. And But on the other hand, I should say that is quite productive and creative.
And the pros, you can drink wine while you do it.
Indeed.
That is
Yeah,
true.
but Nico, we should not forget that we had the most stressful form of examination in our bachelor's. We had oral exams.
Oral exams.
Oh no.
Yes, this is the thing that terrifies all foreign anthropologists I've ever talked with. What we do is we wait for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, regardless, outside of professor's office, and we are reading our notes and we are panicking, and we are all in a collective psychosis, just waiting to go in groups of 5 inside the professor's office, and then it's like an execution, one after the other. They ask questions, and we have to answer immediately, and they ask 3 times each person on a row, and then if one person, like the one that's sitting next to you, half replies the question, then they ask you for further explanation. And this is automatic. You don't have so much time to think. So when I hear about like any kind of written exams, I prefer it than these instant
Of
executions
course.
we had in Pantheon.
That
Very
sounds
understandable,
awful.
yeah.
Yes, but this has to do with some structural, let's say, particularities of of Pantheon University. For example, there are 15 members of staff in our department, which is quite low, and I don't know how many students. So imagine a professor that has to examine an introductory mandatory course from the first year. Perhaps he or she is forced to read 500 essays or something like that. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So that's why I think most of the professors prefer the oral examination, which I totally agree with you. It's inhumane. It's unbearable.
Yeah.
Definitely, I understand the restrictions. So we started talking about anthropology of the North, right? Because I'm interested in this, I started looking at different university departments, like in Aberdeen, in Copenhagen, in Turku, in Finland, in Tromsø, and they use this terminology, and they're interested in what's going on in the north of Europe or in Canada. There are other departments that specialize in Southeastern studies, in studies in Oceania, in Southeastern Europe. Do you think, from your experience as both anthropologists and natives, that there is a particularity to this field, in this area studies, or is it another form of essentialization of the field? What I meant, like anthropology of the North is basically studying particular elements, I wouldn't say whole societies, but particular elements related to environment, related to culture, related to welfare states in the North. And there are many departments across the world that specialize in different area studies within anthropology or in an interdisciplinary level. Do you think that anthropology of the North is a sound terminology, has a meaning to it, or is it another essentialization of grouping together different elements, different societies in order to create an area studies?
I think it's becoming more and more of a thing to do anthropology in the North, as we talked about before as well, that it's becoming more popular to look inwards as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say that it's a whole field.
Which I think is an interesting development, not necessarily a bad one, because like you mentioned, historically it's always been like going far off and exotic. Anthropology doesn't have to be, yeah, of course, it can be really problematic. I really like to see the tendency, which I discussed with some of the African PhDs that were here. I think we discussed it together. Like, it's very interesting to turn around the tendencies of actually like having people from all around the world coming and studying, for example, Norway, studying, because Norwegians have been going down to Africa, down to all of these places for a long time. And it's very interesting to have it the other way around, like the Africans that were here studying in Norway, for example, some of them. So I think that's an interesting turn in the discipline that I would love to see more.
Yeah, me as well.
So, I mean,
sounds
Norwegian
super
studying within
interesting.
Norway, but also like having
Foreigners.
foreigners come and study like North more.
But do you think that we can call it a specific discipline or subdiscipline within anthropology of the North?
I mean,
Or
in
we-
terms of areas,
in
that is,
terms
if
of
we can
area studies,
say Oceania, then I
Exactly,
think we
or
can also
African
say-
studies, for example. Here
Ah.
in this department, there is an African, how do you say that? African
Studies?
seminar. African
Okay.
seminar.
Mm.
Seminars about African anthropology,
Yeah.
let's say, or anthropological research in Africa. So I'm wondering if we can think about this subfield, the anthropology of the North, for example.
Yeah, I think there have also been some seminars, if I don't remember wrong, about the North. So I think
Yeah,
it's definitely an area of studies.
depending on what you define as the North, of course, but in terms of Scandinavia, at least, and maybe
Yeah.
like north of Canada, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
It is
as
becoming,
long
I
as we
think,
keep it like that and not include
include.
US and stuff, because then I feel like, the
Yeah.
cultures
Yeah,
are
yeah.
getting quite different.
No, I mean, yeah.
That's a whole different
Yeah, let's
discussion.
not go into
Let's
that.
not go in there.
Great. Unless Nikos or Manos have anything else to add, I would really like to thank you for this enjoyable and interesting conversation. Maybe in the future we will have Anthropology of the North Part 2. Who knows, if you are willing and interested in what we are doing in this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
Thank you
so
for having us.
Yeah, exactly.
It was nice to meet you.
You too.